We'll just keep it rolling here. We're meeting tonight for the first quarter parking facilities board meeting. We're in room D, punted to room D. Number one here, roll call. Paul DiGirolamo, not here. Brad McKibben. Sean Levine.
Present.
Tim Clardy.
Here.
Aaron Malvite.
Present.
Lisa Herm.
Here.
Okay, we also have Commissioner Andrew Flynn, myself, Phil Wolio, Andrew McCreary, and Mark Quilio from the staff side. Citizens' comments. We do have two today, live in person. So
It's maybe a first.
yeah,
It's my
you
10
wanna come
years.
up and,
Proceed, sure.
just start with your name and address, just so we have it
Sure.
right for.
My name is Bob Garrity, and I am a resident of 750 Washington Road, the Washington Square condos right next door. Jim Simmons is here, but he'll introduce himself shortly. I just wanted to say thank you for the progress that I've seen with putting in an electric vehicle charger on the red level in the south garage. It's encouraging. I'm making an assumption that the conduit that I see there is for the charger. Sounds like it's in the same spot that it was been designated. And I'm interested in, obviously, in hearing what in store in terms of progress. I wanted to report to this group that there was a meeting of the board of Washington Square condominiums Tuesday evening. And at that meeting, a risk assessment for lithium-ion batteries in particular, and mobility applications such as scooters and hoverboards and wheelchairs and electric vehicles was also discussed. And the point that I wanted to raise here is in regard to electric vehicles, where there is an assessment that basically says the garage that we have under all of our living residents is very limited in access and egress, and firefighters would have a very hard time getting in there to extinguish a fire or prevent further damage. So the risk assessment basically says there's a consideration that there would be any moratorium on any electric vehicle charging within that garage until the industry matures a little bit further. We can understand the risks better and what mitigation may be out there. So for at least some period of time, unspecified at this point, there is a moratorium. So the group that was meeting, which included, it was an open meeting for the board, so residents were allowed to be there. There was a question that was asked to be presented to this group, and it essentially said that one, appreciate the work that's going on in the South Garage, but also if there is a consideration that previous discussions could still be considered for adding additional electric vehicle chargers closer to the entrance to Washington Square and dedicated to some of the Washington Square residents. And I think that there was some discussion previously about that idea. And after the second floor installation, could that be brought back up again? And if so, how might we, Washington Square, be able to work with the municipality in developing some guidelines and helping to move the process forward, which we're happy to do. So that was the message, and I would hope to hear something back from this group.
Can I ask a quick question? You were talking about your risk assessment. What is the fire suppression in your garage?
Water,
It's a sprinkler system?
Yes.
Okay.
and that's throughout the building. Per code, I believe so.
Dry, is that a wet, dry system? Probably a dry system.
That's
It's a dry system.
dry system. Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Jim Simmons, and I am previous board president from Washington Square condominium and previous board member. No longer on the board, but I was Andrew's. I picked on him for the last 2 years, asking him about any updates we could possibly use in our own work sessions of the board next door. when I say next door, 750 Washington Road, Washington Square condominium. And I'm a blind person, I don't even drive, but I'm very interested in electric vehicle charging. Because whether we like it or not, it's the future of our car production in the United States. And we have a building that houses 96 automobiles at any one time. And like Bob Garrity, the previous speaker said, we have single access and egress through one door. We have plans to put charging stations in the future. The association next door is doing, it has started an assessment of the power in that building, whether we need to bring new power in or we can use the existing power to develop our own charging stations. They'll probably be outside in our horseshoe parking area on Florida Avenue. That's just the future or the previous administrations, which was mine, thought process. Because I've spoken with Andrew many times and asked him many questions, I wanted to personally say, we appreciate all the effort that the municipality has put forward to put electric vehicle charging. That's my 5 minutes, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, no, we appreciate it. As Andrew pointed out, you don't get guests that often, so it's very nice to have people come and actually have an opinion on parking. It's rare.
Close proximity is easier than signing up for Zoom.
Yeah.
That's right.
I am very curious about, you brought up the fire suppression. I'm very curious as we start thinking about this long term, right? Do we need to update codes for multifamily with parking for the future, right? Yeah, it's something I hadn't thought about, that's clearly an issue. Fire suppression systems that are going to support EV cars, are going to have to be something other than your traditional system.
What's the incineration rate? It can't be substantial.
It is,
Really?
unfortunately.
It's a little
lithium-ion
higher than-
batteries,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
they burn at over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit very quickly.
How's that compared to internal combustion?
Internal combustion is a lower fuel is the primary.
I'm an engineer.
Yes.
The problem with lithium is that it's a huge reductant. It'll take water and divide it into hydrogen and oxygen. That'd snap your fingers. So water fuels the fire.
Okay.
And I've talked with the fire chief, the association has talked with the fire chief in Mount Lebanon, asking them if there are any specific requirements for our own building or for anything in the municipality. And at that time, he said there were no specific requirements.
do you know if they've had any specific training for suppression of electric vehicles? Because I know some of the local fire companies are getting training now. For the most part, the guidance is just to let them burn out. But unfortunately, when they're in an internal structure, that creates a bigger problem. So there's more guidance could be coming out, but for instance, like even at our location, we don't bring any of our EV vehicles indoors that have been in an accident, just in case the battery compartment is compromised. And there's also the hydrochloric acid, which is another issue. It's a pretty corrosive acid. So you want to make sure that, if there's PPE and all kinds of things, contaminants that you'd have to be worried about.
I know that there is a requirement, federal requirement, that every electric vehicle manufacturer produce information for first responders and how to deal with it. But I don't know that they have an answer beyond separate it and let it burn out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, letting it burn out often leads to secondary concern, flames. The other thing, Andrew, as you mentioned, residential code and so on. One of the things that did come up in the conversation was lithium-ion batteries are not just in cars. Wheelchairs, scooters, hoverboards, phones, laptops. So there are a lot of things that can be considered, and there is a risk. I have not really thought an awful lot about, but when it comes to residential areas, there's a life risk.
Right. Yeah, well, yeah, you think of a hoverboard, right? It's relatively contained and it's, I think it's, yeah, right. But when you put an EV car in the bottom of a residential tower, right, you start saying, well, maybe there's more to think about, right, before we start going down this path. I will say that I will commit to learning more, but I have no answers beyond the topic. But they're definitely important questions to answer. Andrew, in terms of the South Garage, the question was expanding what we've done?
Yeah, Jim had a conversation.
Yeah. Andrew and I have spoken that if in the future, after this initial station is installed, I say initial, the second one, because you have a volt that you charge right now. If there's a power available, Andrew and I have talked about perhaps putting it on the 4 or 4.5 level that would be easy access to our building. And then perhaps we would lease the spots, on a long-term basis and maybe dedicate those stations to our unit owners. That a lot of hypotheticals. In
Sure,
this.
yeah. Well, yeah, I think the question I have, Andrew, is are we chasing additional grant dollars around EV? Because there's so much money right now with.
Yeah, we're applying for this one as well, the one we're installing currently.
Right. I'm just wondering, is there more money to be chasing to do this like scale?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So it's just kind of on a per installation.
Correct. Like we talked about in the last meeting, we did approach Duquesne Light. We had a site visit to 4 locations, which they would be, installing the infrastructure and for a 10-year commitment. None of the sites really worked as to where we thought we would want to put the stations. That may be a discussion in the future for areas like the North Garage lower. Once East End Brewing opens up, those types of things, that lot could definitely be more serviceable. There's also issues with pigeons down there and other things that bringing $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 vehicles to charge for a brief period of time we need to maybe get some other better permanent solutions for that to mitigate that. So we're looking at all those. I know we're gonna have the South Garage EV update. Phil can kind of talk to you about where we're at with that, but the thought process is where we put it was that we can go up. So the thought process is that every corner in that corner, we can go up. So 4th floor, absolutely. At some point, we can get to the 4th floor. And the thought is to put the first 2 in, give that a time period to marinate, and then if we want to expand, we go up. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, the run to looking at the entire garage, that was the easiest run to get to, most cost effective. We were able to do it internally relatively quickly. Secondly, is it's ADA compliant. Although there was a court case in which it reversed the action that you don't need to be ADA compliant for installing a EV station, to where someone sued the code and Pennsylvania reverted back to an old code that didn't speak to EV. We didn't want to be in that case. We want to be that if we're going to go up, we're going to be as close to the elevator to service the entire garage and be ADA compliant. So that will be restriped to be ADA compliant. So those spaces will actually lose a space in that corner. So 3 spaces will now become 2 with that ingress egress, out of the vehicle with the dashed line to make sure that it's ADA compliant for a space there. So, because I imagine, like you said, with EV wheelchairs, there's probably going to be EV vans and all those different things that come with it. So that was our thought process, putting it in that corner. We had ideas to put it in the opposite corner, which would actually be the furthest away from the elevator. It's actually probably flatter, but was it a little bit flatter?
The slopes were better.
Slopes were better, but it was the furthest away. I mean, there's no point in putting ADA line furthest away from the elevator.
Yeah.
So, Bill and I walked the garage many times talking about that, and Mark, and we've taken a, hearty look at where we're at with it, and we're satisfied with the second floor and the possible expansion upward.
Sounds like you have a good scope for when we put in a new garage. You know all the requirements that we'll have.
I would like to step out of that conversation quickly. How are we gonna pay for it? That's the other.
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
That's where we're at. So you want to update them just so we can fast forward to that real quick?
Yeah, we can
While we're-
jump to that. Give a quick updates on just some key maintenance items that to hit on of note.
No, I was just talking about just this.
Oh, just EV.
Just EVs to. button up that
Conduit line
conversation.
striping, we took off the original installation, cut like 20 some K off of the original project price. Our guys did it in 2 days, and then kind of we're buttoning it up from there. The contractor who actually run full wire, install station, everything like that will be Sargent Electric. He's gonna be coming right around the first week of February. Shouldn't be more than a 1-day installation. The run isn't that far. He has two boxes to pull from. It's not hard. All the equipment was ordered. It's delivered on hand, sitting down at the South Garage. So unless there's packing peanuts only in the box, we're ready to roll. So we checked the box.
So we're talking mid-February
Yes.
for a full install.
Yeah.
Charges
we'll-
available.
or pending whether the line striping will come secondary, but we'll make it work. We'll figure out.
We're gonna be ordering a sign to say EV charging available for the south garage for at the entrance. One unit.
Is it gonna mimic,
There'll be two ports, one unit. Two ports.
will it mimic a lot with is it a charge point then?
Yeah, it's all gonna be everything the same. Correct.
Right.
Yep.
I volunteer to be a test case.
And Sergeant Electric did that other installation, so they should be.
Yeah, he is very.
They're the
Abundantly
preferred
familiar.
contractor of this. And then the rate still to be determined, preliminarily will be first hour free, just like we do in the overlook lot, and $1 an hour thereafter. That's comparable to other garages in the market.
We lose money?
What?
Doesn't sound like it, does it lose money at that rate?
We will lose a little bit of money depending on how long you go.
Depends on how long.
And the south side depends on what time of day.
Bob's tax bill just went down.
This is gonna be on top of my lease for this one.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So.
So that would be independent of any
Correct.
garage fees,
That's
not
correct.
like, it's,
Correct.
okay, we're,
Correct. So.
That's what we understand.
So that's where we're at this point. So we'll finalize that here in the next couple of weeks. I have a draft email to you sitting in my inbox.
no problem.
So we'll discuss that. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Next item here is approval October minutes. I'm going to be doing a dump of a couple previous meetings to everyone. They're not in line for this one yet. We're doing a little bit of, I call it, making sure we're having consistent messaging across all the boards. So we're working with our IT and PIO to make sure headings are the same. We don't have 6 different agenda templates and, we're getting our act together. So I'll have a dump of meeting minutes for you guys here soon. Not that we've made any big decisions or anything like that in the last 2 minutes, so they're more just to get you caught up, if anything at all. Jump over to new business. This time, if any current member has any new business they'd like to add to the plate for next quarter or anything to chew on, anything like that.
Actually, not to interrupt the board, but I did have a long conversation today with a business owner in Beverly Road. So that's why I said your timing couldn't have been better, because I'll discuss this today with the parking facilities board in the past. These are sort of things, the type of issues that they've discussed and tried to find solutions for. he's been a business owner in the Beverly, his name's Lee Heckman. He's framing over on Beverly Road. He's been there for 35 years. He's finding that there's long-term parking issues with other employees at the single space meters in the Beverly Road Business District. And he's like, I just, it doesn't seem like Mark's been around. He's our meter enforcement. You go, well, indeed, he has not. We've been shorthanded. And both me and the other Mark have been doing the task of a position that was vacated for 6 months. So luckily, I told him that as of Monday, we've filled that position with a great candidate, and I think he'll, so we can get over the enforcement. The other thing is that the LPR allows us to enforce the time limit either with the handheld device or with the LPR vehicle. I will talk to Andrew, we can make a zone of that. You can just drive through there and it will identify vehicles that are parked in excess and allow him to then enforce in kind. But one of the things he also asked is the problem on Saturdays. Now, a little historical history regarding that. Enforcement was usually done, was requested to be done on Saturdays in the Washington Road Business District, maybe 20 years ago, maybe even longer, by the Washington Road BPA, because of people just parking in front of the businesses all day, and they wanted to have a vibrant turnover on Saturdays. And so, but Beverly Road wasn't all that interested in it. And so we had an enforcement program on Saturdays in the Washington Road Business District. And that was the policy of the old parking authority, and became an agreement with the Washington Road Business District. And Beverly Road was happy. And when we came over, then Chief Police Coleman McDonough was like, well, what's the enforcement hours over on Beverly Road? Because there was a business owner on Washington Road that says, you're ticketing my customers on Saturday, but not ticketing the Beverly Road. It gives them an unfair advantage. And so I discussed it with Coleman McDonough, and then police chief, and he goes, well, yeah, we have to enforce uniformly. And so we started issuing warning tickets over in the Beverly Road District. Beverly Road Business District went to the commissioner, and the commissioner changed the ordinance. So there is no enforcement over Saturday. Mr. Heckman would like to revisit having enforcement in the business district on Saturdays. So, sorry for the long-winded explanation, but there is something to be considered. But again, I told him that, that was actually, that I know it's in the street appendix that define the definitions. I mean, that may be something more in line with the traffic report. But I told him, since we were having this meeting tonight, I'd voiced our concerns. And again, we have talked about the footprint of the Beverly Road Business District and the limitations we have of expanding parking, and the fact that we, back in 1987 or 86, expanded the existing overload block, doubled it in size back then, but there's just not a big enough footprint to really put a deck to be cost efficient.
Yeah,
For
we had that
additional
discussion.
parking. And with Mediterra over there, there's a high part, and the school at the school at the same time as school lunches, and there's a high volume of traffic over there on a regular basis. And I guess Saturdays can be quite tedious too. So I promised them I'd discuss it and bring it to your attention, to the members of this board and the commissioner. And so there you have it.
I will talk to Mr. Milliron, because I'm sure he has an opinion as well on the topic. It seems like, there's some degrees of, we just have to have some consensus, right, of how we approach this, and we're not gonna make everybody happy. Right, and again, this wasn't an issue until Mediterra went in, and now everybody's frustrated.
Right.
So I think it's just,
And the fact that the time limits at single space meters on Beverly, that's something we can do, because it is regulated as a 2-hour time zone. So that's something we can do with the LPR vehicle, and but it's the fact of the Saturday.
And it's interesting about enforcement and those on the other end of paying it. So if you go over there on Saturday, there are so many people paying the meters, paying the pay stations, going there and expecting to pay on Saturday. It's not, and I think even the enforcement side, I don't think people will get mad about it. But I expected to pay, I didn't pay, I'm gonna get enforced on. I just, it's a pretty, there's so many, I took my son to 12 straight Saturdays at 10 a.m. And I can't tell you how many people I see going to the meter expecting to pay on Saturday. And I go, I don't have to pay.
Well, from over 50 years of experience, Beverly Road is its own unique animal.
So,
I mean, even when I went over there after St. Bernard basketball practice and getting ice cream at Ice's, or going to the Reuben House Deli.
And we did investigate a deck, or at least do a costing model on it at some point, or was it just not feasible?
Yeah, it
Probably
was-
about 5 years ago, there was
When we
a.
did the overview lot, it was a conversation piece of like, are there different approaches, and the space was just so small
Yeah,
that, I remember thinking, well, I suppose we could eminent domain properties, but it was like, well, no, we're not going there, right? It just, the
it's just not long enough.
yeah,
Like you don't have turnaround space to
Right.
build something up and then go around, it's just
Yeah.
a square.
And it required taking part of the street, if I remember correctly,
yeah.
Or,
the whole street.
Yeah, so putting in a parking structure there would require extensive work, which would be more expensive than we want.
Yes.
for one block business district.
Yes.
Well, when we did it for assembling properties, it's not something that is cost efficient, and from the history of doing the academy lot. And again, those are nice homes over there, and people have lived in there long. They're not probably, they're willing, we just got to negotiate price. I'm sure everybody has a price, but I don't know if it's be economical for what, would we be deserving the community by overpaying for property?
Yeah, the multi-family there, yeah,
One home.
right.
Any other good?
We'll jump down to old business here. Go through some just quick maintenance updates of note. The cold snap on the 23rd, we survived fairly well. Our furnace that serves the workroom break area, the south garage, the inducer motor decided to fail that morning. So we lost heat in there. So we had notes on bathrooms with electric heaters, said do not shut door, be courteous, all that good stuff. So south garage survived pretty well. Over at the north garage, we did get a electric heater finally installed in the rear tenant hallway. That's only significant because each water service per shell comes in back there. We've had times where the meter's not spinning anymore, and it's not because anyone's not using water, it's because it's frozen solid. So we finally got some heat back in there to relieve some of those issues. The only issue we did have in the north garage, La Pomponnais, ended up having a shark bite T fitting blowout on one of their foot baths overnight. Filled the entire space with about 3/4 inch of water. We only noticed it because it cleared a threshold that it started pouring out towards the booth in the garage and icing immediately. So we worked, as fast as we could with her. Our staff gave some quick relief, but eventually, her insurance comes in and deals with the remediation and everything. She was, for as bad as it was back up and having appointments within 2 days. So she was thrilled with our response and all the things we've been, she's been going through over there. So just to keep that space flowing.
she put some nice kudos out on Facebook too for quick response and.
Yeah,
put it on her page.
she's awesome. She's an awesome. Over at the south garage, we also replaced the HVAC unit in the elevator machine room. towards the end of summer. The elevator techs had mentioned to us that, that it was towards the end of its life, and we knew that wasn't a top priority, but we had the ability to do that, so we did. The other items in South Garage we'll touch on farther down here. Over in the North Garage, we replaced the split system heat pump in the elevator 2 machine room. That's only significant because when it gets that cold, the hydraulic fluid can gum up, the elevator car won't respond. So that unit was pretty vital, and we were able to get that changed without any incident. So we now have a HVAC unit in there that can heat down to -15. So we're in good shape over there. If you notice the nice blue light on the front of North Garage, that is a new AED cabinet. That one has its own indicator light. You'll see the same light down at Dixon Field, down by the fields on Cedar, over by the concession restroom building. These cabinets in blue light are, 1-in-1 with each other. The only difference is these cabinets are now heated. They have a small heater in there, keeps the batteries of the AED functioning the way they should. They're running into some issues where our fire department would actually pull them in the wintertime, leaving an empty cabinet. You don't want anyone running towards an empty cabinet. So you'll see another one pop up whenever we figure it out somehow over at Beverly as well. I think that's the last location I'm working through with them. Other than that, we have some ongoing lighting replacements. Our Sylvania fixtures that replaced our guaranteed energy saving fixtures that were kind of not brand name. We started to experience a pretty high loss number. They're brand name fixtures, they're good stuff, but you can have bad batches of drivers go and everything like that. We started noticing it because we shared that same fixture with the apparatus bay at our firehouse. So once those lights started going out, that really kind of threw it into gear. So you might see some disruptions in front there. We have a couple over the booth that need addressed for the second time. The drivers are covered under warranty, luckily, with our lighting supplier. So he's been good about that. So just when you see ladders and chaos, quick chaos going on, that's what we're
There was
doing.
some discussion that maybe that GE timer was going to be replaced with, because I think there's what's occurring is there's some events are being skipped, and at first I thought it might have been a conflict of events, but it's not, because I rescheduled the times. It's just that it's skipping events.
So on the GE one itself, even after we replaced the
boards and the
boards, with the spares.
Yeah,
that were in there.
it looks like that on occasion, because you'll see that the entire bank on the exit lane is out, and it's time to come on and then go out. I think it's just sometimes on occasion, I can't make it replicate, but it seems that it's skipping an event. At first I thought it was a conflict, and some of the events were real tight together time.
Yeah.
801, 802, 803, and I changed them up to 805. So I just, it just may be something in the box itself.
Yeah, we have a quote for a manual replacement, which would just be old school timers where you move dials. They work, you touch them, they work, they do what they're supposed to. We also have an option for an upgraded one that could have a web-based platform where schedules could be created, holidays, closures, we could capitalize on some savings there. So we're going to look at both models, knowing that cost will directly reflect, new versus old, but schedules will also do that as well. You're able to cut power completely from the fixture, just not on and off. That saves you more of a draw. So yes, we are looking at that. It's been backseat for some other issues, but thanks for mentioning that, because the second it comes up and craps out will be when my quote's no good anymore. So that's how it'll go. Over at East End, they're getting ready to do some punch lists with their contractors. On their end, minor involvement from us, just kind of helping with troubleshooting, locating duct detectors, things like that they don't know are there. Couple issues with the back hallway slop sink. It's kind of a shared custodial closet. They had some comments, I think, from like a kind of a early walkthrough with health department being, that they're serving food, drink, everything like that. So it kind of puts different requirements on that back hallway. So we're working through a couple issues for him real quick. But he's been really good to work with. His crews have, they've been in and out of there a lot as of recent. He's made a lot of progress on that end space there.
What is their access point? Because they aren't going to the front, are they?
The rear hallway that goes along as you're walking up the steps of from Parsway, that hallway you see on your left, there's a door that kicks you into sort of the back of house. And it's a hallway that has doors into each shell. So that's where they've been, most of the time, whenever you see that the streetscape has them blocked off, but they're still in there working. That's kind of how they're getting it now, is through there. Still waiting to coordinate the weather repairs in full, upgrade to elevator car 1, which is Washington Road. Our goal is to do this while everything is still gone. We don't want the dust to settle from sidewalk project and bring on another, multi-week closure. So have to refresh with that vendor, see where they're at as far as lead time on that, because we're essentially rebuilding, a car with inside the hoistway. So that'll be several weeks. So the communication to businesses and especially those eye appointments and other medical places over there, we need to make sure we're doing at least the best we can in terms of letting them know so that schedules can be adjusted, drop-offs, maybe we grab a spot in front somewhere for a temporary drop-off. I'm not sure how it'll look yet, but we'll talk about all that. Real quick on the personnel end, our Foreman 1, Don Hazley, he retired this last Friday. He had over 30 years in the parking function, 40 years with the parking authority, and then when it transitioned over to Mount Lebanon, he still drives by every single day. So he said he made a mistake, but he said no, give that. But he's awesome. Dude. Yeah, he may show up in some capacity, so you just keep your eyes out. But yeah, he was great. In doing that, we also had one of the laborers in parking get promoted to one of our carpenter positions. That happened probably last quarter, probably something I should have let you guys know about then. Didn't really matter until now, being that we have 2 veteran type out of 3 that are gone from the garage. The carpenter still is close by. So, hey, do you remember where this is? Yeah, I'll be right there. So that is still going on, which is good. So we've interviewed 5 candidates this past week for a labor's position. That labor can fluctuate between public works operations, parking, wherever we need them to go. So we're taking those steps to fill that, see how the department kind of shakes out and who we put where. Jumping down to the South Garage structural study, we finally got under agreement with Carl Walker. We're going to start that. They're going to start their walkthroughs and assessments about the 2nd week of February, hoping to have deliverables from them end of April in terms of, health of garage study, recommendations, future maintenance, things to look for, things to do right now, all that sort of thing. So we did go ahead and go with them. I forget how many proposals we received. I think over 5 or 6. And this one was the most pertinent to what we were doing.
So we expect a report from them at the end of April?
Yes, yeah, they're hoping to have all that back to us end of April. The EV station, just real quick to touch back on that, we got conduit up the past week and a half, just buttoning up penetrations through the slab, making sure we fill those the correct way, get them sealed up. Sergeant will come in and then install the station. We'll have 2 dual ports. Hope we get a nice little stretch of warm weather where we can still line stripe effectively in there. If not, we'll figure it out. So that's kind of it for the EV station, and hopefully next quarter we'll just be letting you know how that's going, not how we're going to get there. So.
Phil, will they need, back to Carl Walker, will they need sections of the garage to be closed off for their evaluation?
We'll have a pre-con with them, and I'll shoot you invite thing, probably on site. They don't seem formal enough that we need to come and get a room and all that, but I would imagine
Probably
they'd like it
best to be
some-
walking through doing it.
Right.
I just want, in the past, it's usually they do it at night with some chain drags and stuff, but they need sections to be clear.
Yeah, we'll work through that with them. Just got under agreement with them last week, so we should have something kicked off with them soon. Also, it'll be out for bid soon, will be the North Garage top deck coating. That coating's starting to fail at the expansion joints. Actually had some infiltration of water down through, caused some flaking and spalling of a T-joint, which will also be the repair, which will also be added to that deck coating job as well as I don't even think it's an alternate, I think it's just part of the project. So while everything is still crazy and dust is flying, we're gonna make sure that we get that top coating redone and get a good maintenance plan going forward, being that we'll have new eyes, new staff around, make sure we're taking care of it the right way, applying the correct de-icing materials, the short-term, long-term maintenance of sealing joints, make sure we're looking at everything how we should be. So that's it on there. If you want to jump to complete streets, I just threw this on here if there was, I know it was whole conversation, but if there was any updates or.
Not particularly, I mean, just for everybody's reference, complete streets policy is basically, the intent is to, to guide future thinking about our public right of way to be, all modes of travel first, rather than car first, right? As traditionally you would think that we all say, well, we design a road, we get cars through places, and then we put sidewalks in if we need pedestrians, right? But as obviously as modes of transportation are starting to evolve, the complete streets policy is really designed to, or at least the way I think about it, is designed to ask the traffic engineer to say, how do we think about this right of way, given how mobility is changing over time, and do we need to think about different modes of mobility, whether it's cars or EVs or wheelchairs or bicycles or electric bikes or pedestrians, because again, as we're starting to recognize, well, and I think one of the interesting things that I've always come back to is, people always talk about, that parking doesn't attract people, people attract people, right? So how do you create a space for people, cars, and when you find really good spaces, people will find a way to get there, right? They will find a place to, a way to get to a destination, regardless of, whether there's lots of parking or there's very little parking. So how do we understand, these public rights of ways more holistically over time as we adapt them? Because again, you tear up a road once every 40 years. So how do we, when we tear up a road, how do we design it appropriately going forward for kind of the next generation? So at this point, right, the policy's been adopted. I anticipate that, this next year after the comp plan is done, we will probably be looking to fund an active transportation plan, which is more about different modes of travel. You're right, we'll take into account a lot of different things. One example I would give you is, we have a lot of paper streets that no one owns. But if we want to design a walkable community where people are walking off the street, right? We have these paper streets where in some cases we might want to proactively as a municipality take those over and manage them proactively as, pedestrian routes or cycling routes. Now, is that everywhere? No, of course not. There's only a few places we would want to look at those types of things. But again, how do we understand our whole transportation network? Given that we talk about being a walkable community, how do we lean into that and really make sure that we're being as effective as possible? So really, a policy's been adopted, but it's the first step in a long journey. It's going to be an evolutionary process as we go forward. A lot of it right now is just about, again, education, right? Getting the people thinking about it. But the next topic, if I can skip to the next one just briefly, is part of the reason that we're doing board realignment is that we have a traffic board, which looks at cars moving, and we have a parking board, which looks at cars parking, but we don't have any board that says, let's look at sidewalks, right? And that's a huge topic. I mean, honestly, if you ask me what residents are coming to me about, 90% of the time, they're like, I want a sidewalk. So we're not necessarily thinking about all modes of mobility as efficiently and as effectively as possible. That's not wrong, right? We've spent 70 years as a car-centric community. So, I mean, we have the right infrastructure for where we've been. But it's really, at this point, kind of the question of how do we think about our how do we think about our infrastructure from a transportation network for the next 40 years? So again, whether it's realigning the board to have a mobility and transportation board, or it's having a complete streets policy and asking our traffic engineers and the like to be thinking about how do we design our streets to be more pedestrian, friendly, and less about creating, fast space for a car to drive through. That's really the path that we're on. Where that goes, it's hard to say, right? I'm not a traffic engineer, but hopefully, over time, we build more and more knowledge and have better and better practices around adapting these rights of way to, whatever that future use is going to be, because it is changing.
Yeah. Board realignment, is there any need to jump into that yet? It's
No,
pretty
there
early.
isn't a lot right now, but the thing I would be asking everybody, and this one, I think for this group, it's pretty straightforward, I think, right? We focused on parking. It's pretty obvious. And traffic is pretty clear also. So I think the consolidation of these two is going to be relatively logical. There's going to be more scope for this, this combined board, because we're going to look at other modes of travel and be asking kind of some of these bigger questions. Some of the other boards, right, it's like that we're looking at combining historical preservation, environmental sustainability, and economic development, right? That kind of can feel, right, really weird. I mean, but in a way, it's like, so how do we make sure that kind of the key topics are being carried forward, right? And finding a home in the kind of the new structure. That's really what I'm asking every board that I talk to right now is, what are the key topics that we want to make sure we're keeping an eye on as we transition? And make sure that those topics, find a place, structurally in the board, as opposed to just being dropped and being forgotten, because that's the last thing we want to do. So it's an ask right now, is just think about, what are the topics that we've been covering over time, and let's be ready to raise them and have a conversation about what do we want to make sure we don't lose from this topic, as we start to prepare for that transition, which is at least
We boards you bringing together. Are you
So-
planning on bringing together?
So we are going from 11 advisory boards to 5. Now, the statutory boards will still stay. They're right, the planning, zoning, those types of boards, they still will exist. They have to by law. But the advisory boards, we're going to try to consolidate pretty aggressively. And again, for a few reasons. One, just kind of what I've talked about, right? It's like, we have traffic and we have parking, but we don't have sidewalks, so that makes no sense. But at the same time, to a certain extent, a lot of it is staff time. I mean, this board is very well represented from a staff perspective. Not every board is, right? And we have, to his point, right, we have different formats. People are trying to figure out Zoom, right? It's like there's just some administrative challenge to each board, and staff have to spend a lot of time. And it's like, wait a minute, let's create some standard structure in terms of just frankly governance and patterns of how we communicate out to the public, about how we communicate to board members, expectations, providing training, right? So that we start to get more traction and start moving forward on these topics, as opposed to, well, I'll just put it this way, there's a reason that we went from monthly parking meetings to quarterly parking meetings. Right? It's like, does this make sense?
So also, 5 commissioners, 5 boards.
Right.
You guys are doing a ton of work.
Right.
And it makes sense to just.
Well, that for me, I think part of it, right, traditionally, and I think right now, most boards have commission liaisons that are engaged, but that hasn't always been the case. Yeah, frankly, when I was on the parking board, I think well, I had one commissioner show up once. I won't say who that was. Right, so that's not always the case, right? And that's frankly a governance question in my mind, right? If, I really firmly believe that boards should be proposing policy for change, right? This is where you kind of think about issues and propose changes to policy. And if we don't have a clear structure for, that process of, well, you should be looking at policies, you should be asking questions, you should be making recommendations. And if a commission liaison isn't showing up and you have a random staff person who hasn't been involved, which isn't the case here, but in some boards it is, how does that process actually flow, right? I need this feedback. I need, whether a commissioner shows up or not, I need to have that cycle being baked in effectively so that we are sustaining kind of resident feedback. Otherwise, we're wasting everybody's time, and that's the last thing I want to do.
And are you looking at a January 2024 start to this consolidation?
I think it would be March 2024. Yeah, because we'll go through the full cycle, and then there'll be some trail period.
How many folks will be displaced?
Well, we're hoping that, it will roll off over time again, because we have so many that trail off because their terms end naturally. So we're hoping that there will be a place, for, everybody who still has a term. We won't force anybody out, but there will be people whose term ends, and we'll say there is space, to continue. But that's still being played out. As we refine a lot of this, but that's kind of the details that we need to work out. We've really focused on the structure, and now it's really getting kind of the meat of who and how and the topics kind of bedded down as we do this year-long transition.
It'll be a brand new one.
A brand new. Oh, brand new board. Yes. Andrew is not happy with me.
No, I'm not.
Because I took his pension advisory board and I renamed it the financial management board.
I still,
Don't
don't even know the name of it yet.
Because again, I like the pension investment advisory board. I think they do great work, but I think there are potentially other areas that a board could be looking at in terms of finances, asking broader questions. Again, I think frankly fees could be a broader discussion, around the municipality. So I relabeled it, knowing that Andrew could take it in different directions if he wanted to. Doesn't sound like he does. And what's interesting is another area that we haven't placed a board, but a lot of other municipalities do have a board for is public safety. Right, they'll have public safety, oversight board or something along those lines. We've never had one, and we aren't intending to, but it's one that I kind of scratch my head and say, why don't we? How do we engage with police and fire from a resident board perspective? But that's one that we haven't contemplated, so. That's all I got. Unless people have questions.
And what's wrong?
Parking light.
Any other commission updates from
No.
stuff across the board?
That's the main
Okay.
stuff.
Announcements, anybody? Good there. Looking for a motion to adjourn in a second.
So moved.
Second.
1 and 2. All right.
All right.
We're adjourned.
All right,
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
bye.
For allowing us to attend.